Let's take a look at where HTML came from. Before we look at where it came from, I'll briefly show you what it is. I'll start with an example of a web page. Here you see a web page. This is a web application that accompanies my Pluralsight course, Building a Global Application with Azure Platform as a Service. It is a simple web application with pages that display text and images. And every page can be accessed by a unique URL, like this. This URL is unique throughout the internet. That is how my web browser was able to navigate to this page. All of this is HTML, which itself can contain URLs or links to other web pages, like this GitHub page. And when I right-click, I can select View Page Source to actually see the HTML that this page is made of. It consists out of elements with attributes, and we'll talk about that more later on. Now that we've seen it, it's more easy to talk about. Here is a definition of HTML that I think fits well. HTML is the standard markup language for creating web pages and applications. So it is the standard language for the web. And it is a markup language and not a programming language or a scripting language. This means that you use it to control the presentation of data, just like we've seen in the website, where the data is the text and the images. So where did HTML come from? In the previous module, we've seen that it sprouted up at the same time as the World Wide Web and the first web browser. HTML was originally specified in 1990, together with the web browser and the World Wide Web. And it wasn't until 1993 that the first official draft proposal of an HTML specification was defined by the Internet Engineering Task Force. This was a proposal for an actual standard, something that should be used by all web browsers. Around the same time, another rivaling specification called HTML+ was proposed that suggested standardizing already implemented features like tables and fill-out forms. After these drafts expired in early 1994, the Internet Engineering Task Force created a working group that created the HTML 2.0 specification that would serve as the standard for web browsers. After that, the HTML specification was further developed by the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, that proposed the HTML 3.2 specification in January of 1997. Later that year, in December of 1997, the W3C published a recommendation for HTML 4.0. Then, in 1999, a revision called HTML 4.01 was published by the W3C. And aside from drafts and minor versions, no new versions were published for a long time. Until in 2014, HTML5 was published by the W3C after being developed by the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group, which later became a joint deliverable with the W3C. HTML5 offers a large number of new HTML elements that allow for more expressive markup and more interactive web pages. In 2016, the W3C delivered HTML 5.1, and in 2017, HTML 5.2. As you can see, developing a specification and evolving it is hard and time-consuming. So, who manages the HTML specification? You've heard about several task forces and organizations that were involved in the creation and evolution of HTML. Let's talk about them some more, so that you understand who did what. In 1990, it was the inventor of the World Wide Web and the web browser, Tim Berners-Lee, that came up with the first specification of HTML, the first elements that it consisted of. This wasn't a standard yet. In 1993, the Internet Engineering Task Force proposed the first official specification, which they hoped would become a standard. This is a United States-based group that wants to create standards so that the internet becomes better. They also are heavily involved in the TCP/IP standard. Since 1996, the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, maintains the HTML specification, with input from commercial software vendors. The W3C was actually founded by Tim Berners-Lee in October of 1994. And the following didn't show up on the timeline because it didn't have to do with a new version of the specification, but in 2000, HTML officially became an international standard, registered with the International Organization for Standardization and the International Electronical Commission. And in 2004, a new group founded by people from Mozilla, Apple and Opera was formed. This group was called the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. This group formed in response to the slow development of web standards by the W3C. The group started working on HTML 5.0, which was adopted by the W3C as the way forward and became a joint deliverable of the W3C and the Web Hypertext Application Technology Working Group. HTML5 is now considered a living standard. Some say that there will never be a 6.0 version of HTML, as HTML5, or the living HTML standard, will just be evolved to have new features.